You've probably driven past a highway rest stop late at night and noticed something strange. Row after row of semi-trucks parked in diagonal spaces, completely still, but every single one of them running. Engines rumbling, exhaust rising into the cold air, headlights off, but the whole machine vibrating with power. Nobody's driving anywhere. The cabs are dark. The trucks might sit there for 8 or 10 hours without moving an inch. Your first thought is probably the same as everyone else's. Just turn it off. You turn off your car when you park it. Everyone does. Leaving an engine running while parked seems wasteful, pointless, maybe even illegal. All that fuel burning for nothing while the truck just sits there. But if you pull into one of these rest stops at 2 in the morning on a January night in Wyoming or Minnesota, you'll notice something else. The temperature outside might be 15 below zero. The wind cuts across the parking lot hard enough to rock the trailers on their suspensions, and inside those idling cabs, you can see the faint glow of interior lights, the blue flicker of a phone screen, sometimes the outline of a person moving around in the sleeper compartment behind the driver's seat. Those engines aren't running for no reason. They're running because shutting them off could mean the difference between a driver waking up in the morning or not waking up at all. A semi-truck cab isn't just the front part of a big vehicle. For long-haul drivers, the ones running cross-country routes that take days or weeks to complete, that cab is home. Behind the driver's seat in most long-haul trucks is a sleeper berth, a compartment about the size of a small bedroom that contains a full mattress, storage cabinets, sometimes a small refrigerator, and enough space for a person to stand up and move around. This isn't a luxury feature. It's a legal requirement built into how the trucking industry operates. Federal hours of service regulations, enforced by the Department of Transportation, mandate that drivers can only drive for 11 hours within a 14-hour window, and then they must take a mandatory 10-hour break before starting another shift. That break has to happen somewhere, and for drivers in the middle of a cross-country run, that somewhere is the sleeper berth in their truck. When a truck is parked at a rest stop overnight, the driver isn't taking a quick nap before getting back on the road. They're legally required to be there, resting for 10 full hours, and during that time the truck is functionally their apartment. They eat meals there, sleep there, sometimes spend their off time watching shows on a tablet or talking to family on the phone. The engine idling outside isn't powering a parked vehicle. It's running the heat, the air conditioning, the electrical outlets, and in many cases the refrigeration unit on the trailer hooked up behind the cab. The truck is parked, but it's still working. The instinct to just shut off the engine and restart it in the morning makes perfect sense if you're thinking about a regular car. You park your sedan in the driveway, turn the key, and walk inside. In the morning, you come back out, turn the key again, and the engine starts right up. This works fine because a gasoline engine uses spark plugs to ignite the fuel, and the process doesn't require much heat to function properly. A diesel engine works completely differently. Diesel fuel doesn't ignite from a spark. It ignites from compression. The engine squeezes air inside the cylinder so hard that the air itself heats up to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and when diesel fuel sprays into that superheated air, it ignites on its own. This compression-ignition process is what makes diesel engines so efficient and powerful, but it also means the engine needs heat to work properly. When a diesel engine sits off in freezing temperatures, everything inside it gets cold. The metal contracts, the oil thickens into something closer to syrup than liquid, and the fuel itself can start to gel if the temperature drops low enough. Starting a cold diesel engine in these conditions means the cylinders have to compress cold air. The fuel doesn't atomize properly, and the combustion process is incomplete and rough. The engine starts, but it's under enormous strain before the oil has warmed up enough to flow through the system and protect the moving parts. Fleet mechanics will tell you that a single cold start in sub-zero temperatures puts wear on a diesel engine equivalent to hundreds of miles of normal highway driving. Every time you shut off that engine overnight in winter and start it cold in the morning, you're adding the equivalent of a full day's worth of wear to the motor before the truck even leaves the parking lot. Over the lifetime of a truck that might run for 1,000,000 miles, those cold starts add up to serious damage. But engine wear is actually the secondary concern. The primary concern is keeping the driver alive. When the outside temperature drops to 20 below zero, which happens regularly in northern states during winter, the inside of an unheated truck cab reaches the same temperature within about 30 minutes of the engine shutting off. At that temperature, exposed skin can develop frostbite in under 10 minutes. A person trying to sleep in those conditions wouldn't just be uncomfortable, they would be in genuine danger. The idling engine runs the heater, which keeps the sleeper berth at a livable temperature through the night. Without it, drivers in cold climates would need to find a motel room every single night, which would be logistically impossible in many areas and prohibitively expensive on routes where the nearest town with available rooms might be 50 miles off the highway. But there's another layer to this that most people never consider. A significant number of long-haul truck drivers use CPAP machines at night. These are medical devices used by people with sleep apnea, a condition where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. The CPAP machine uses a small pump to keep the airway open, and it requires continuous electrical power to operate. If the engine shuts off, the electrical system shuts off, and the CPAP machine stops working. A driver who can't use their medical equipment doesn't just have an uncomfortable night. They show up to drive the next morning without having gotten proper rest, which makes them a safety risk on the highway for everyone around them. The idling engine isn't just about comfort. For some drivers, it's about being able to use the medical equipment that keeps them healthy enough to do their job safely. Then there's what's in the trailer behind the cab. A large percentage of long-haul trucks are pulling refrigerated trailers, called reefers in industry terminology. These aren't just keeping things cool. They're maintaining precise temperatures, sometimes as specific as 34 degrees Fahrenheit, to keep cargo from spoiling. That cargo might be fresh strawberries from California heading to grocery stores in Chicago. It might be frozen meat being transported from a processing plant to distribution centers. It might be medical supplies, vaccines that need to stay within a narrow temperature range, or insulin that becomes useless if it gets too warm. The value of the cargo in a single refrigerated trailer can easily reach tens of thousands of dollars, and all of it becomes worthless if the temperature control fails. The refrigeration unit on the trailer runs off power from the truck. If the engine shuts off overnight and the trailer warms up, the cargo is lost. A driver who parks for a 10-hour rest period and shuts off the engine could wake up to find that the entire load has spoiled, costing their employer or client massive financial losses and potentially ending their own career in the industry. The idling engine keeps the refrigeration running, which keeps the cargo viable, which keeps the entire cold chain logistics system functioning the way grocery stores and pharmacies and restaurants depend on it functioning. At this point, you might be thinking about laws. Most states have anti-idling regulations that restrict how long vehicles can run while parked, usually with limits around 5 or 10 minutes. These laws exist for good reasons, mainly to reduce air pollution and noise in residential areas near highways and truck routes. But federal regulations carve out specific exceptions for exactly the situations long-haul truckers face. Trucks with sleeper berths can idle during extreme temperatures, defined as below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, or above 75 degrees. They can idle when running necessary equipment like refrigeration units. They can idle when the driver needs to use medical devices that require power. So, a truck sitting at a rest stop with its engine running all night isn't violating the law. It's operating under federal exceptions that recognize the realities of how long-haul trucking works. The driver is following one set of rules that requires them to rest for 10 hours, while simultaneously operating under another set of rules that permits the idling necessary to make that rest period survivable and legal. This is one parked truck, two sets of regulations, both applying at the same time. The industry came up with a solution to this problem decades ago. It's called an auxiliary power unit, or APU, and it's essentially a small generator about the size of a large suitcase that bolts onto the side of the truck. The APU runs on diesel fuel, just like the main engine, but it burns far less because it's only powering the cab's climate control and electrical systems rather than running a massive 13-litre engine designed to pull 80,000 pounds up mounting grades. An APU can keep the sleeper berth heated or cooled, run the electrical outlets for lights and devices and medical equipment, and do all of this while burning maybe a tenth of the fuel that idling the main engine would consume. It's cleaner, more efficient, and solves the problem elegantly. The catch is cost. Installing an APU runs between $8,000 and $12,000. For large trucking companies with fleets of hundreds or thousands of trucks, that's a manageable capital expense that pays for itself in fuel savings over a couple of years. But for independent owner-operators, drivers who own their own truck and contract their services to different companies, that upfront cost can be impossible to absorb. An owner-operator might be running on thin profit margins where an unexpected repair bill of $3,000 represents a serious financial crisis. Asking them to spend $12,000 on an APU, even if it would save money in the long run, requires having $12,000 available to spend, and many simply don't. So the main engine keeps running, burning about a gallon of diesel per hour, because the alternative costs more money than the driver has. Trucking hasn't always worked this way. Go back to the 1940s and early 1950s, before the interstate highway system existed, and long-haul freight moved on two-lane roads that passed through every small town. Drivers stopped at motels for the night, slept in beds, and got back on the road in the morning. The interstate highway system, which started construction in the late 1950s, changed everything. Routes got longer, delivery schedules got tighter, and stopping at motels became logistically impossible. Sleeper cabs appeared in the 1960s as a response. Drivers could pull over at rest areas, sleep in the berth, and get back on the road without losing time or money on rooms. But diesel engines of that era had serious problems with cold starts. The oil would get so thick in freezing temperatures that some truck depots developed a practice that sounds insane. Mechanics would drain the oil out of engines at night, store it in heated buildings, and pour it back in before morning. That was the actual solution. Idling overnight was a massive improvement. The practice became standard, built into training programs and maintenance schedules and the general culture of trucking. Even as technology improved, the behavior stayed because it was embedded in how the industry worked. You've been interacting with this system your entire life without realizing it. That banana you bought in January rode in a refrigerated trailer that idled overnight at distribution centers along its route north. The medication at your pharmacy, especially anything temperature-sensitive like insulin or vaccines, traveled in climate-controlled trucks that kept their engines running during mandatory rest periods. Every item in the refrigerated section of your grocery store stayed at safe temperatures, partly because trucks kept running through the night. That Amazon order that arrived in perfect condition during July heat rode in a climate-controlled truck whose engine idled while the driver slept. The diesel smell you noticed at highway rest areas comes from drivers legally parked for required breaks, keeping engines on so they won't freeze. So CPAP machines work. So cargo arrives intact. The system that keeps your groceries fresh and your medications effective depends on trucks idling overnight at rest stops across the country. The industry is changing, though slowly. Electric auxiliary power units running off batteries are getting better and more affordable. Shore power hookups that let trucks plug in like phones are expanding along major freight corridors. Some newer trucks have automatic shutdown systems, and battery systems can keep cabs climate-controlled for hours without running the engine. Fully electric semi-trucks will eventually change the equation completely because their cab systems run off battery packs rather than engines. The technology exists to solve this problem, and it's being deployed more widely every year, but the gap between having a solution and every driver affording that solution remains wide, especially for independent operators. You pull into that rest stop at 2 in the morning and see a row of trucks with their engines running, and your first thought is waste. But what you're looking at is a federal regulation requiring rest, diesel engine physics that make cold starts destructive, medical equipment that needs power to function, temperature-sensitive cargo worth thousands of dollars, and an infrastructure gap that hasn't fully closed yet. The sound you found annoying is the hum of the system that stocked your refrigerator this morning. Those idling trucks aren't burning fuel for nothing. They're keeping drivers alive in sub-zero temperatures, keeping medicine viable during transport, and making sure the food supply chain works the way you expect it to work when you walk into a grocery store and find fresh produce in the middle of winter. What looked like a simple problem with an obvious solution turns out to be a complex system with competing requirements, legal obligations, medical necessities, and economic realities all operating at once. If you drove a semi-truck for a living and had to sleep in it during a Minnesota winter, would you shut off the engine to save fuel? Leave your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.